Today I'm drawing Kakashi Hatake from Naruto and using blue pen. Kakashi has always been has always been really good for character design because he's recognizable almost instantly by anybody who's into anime. Um, at least a little bit past there's people who could be into anime because of like the hype more, but like anybody who's actually sat down and tried to watch anime, like find their own stuff, that they probably have heard of Naruto and they probably have seen him before. And if they have anime ringing up in their algorithm, like anybody who does anime art or has anime meme stuff going on in their algorithm on Instagram, for example, they probably seen him before, even if they don't know what his name is, right? So there's definitely some record. I was speaking about it a little bit in the short forms, but here in the long form, like to expand a little bit more, like yeah, he's definitely recognizable character, not the main character of the series, but he is the sensei of the main character who the show is named after. And especially before even before Naruto had Naruto Shippuden, and there's Boruto now, which I actually don't know anything about because I haven't watched it, but I just know it's like the timeline continued onwards, and Naruto and all the character cast got older and had kids, and their kids are experiencing what they're experiencing. Um, on a side note, like it's kind of just talking about the lore. What I do know is that I don't know if that's a show. I don't know if I'll ever watch Boruto or really get into it. That what happens is like if I even will have time to watch anime, like I'm probably gonna prioritize watching something that like I might rewatch a series I really like, or maybe there's a new season that came out because all years will go by and like maybe I'm not really watching anime, but I'll hear like a new season came out of something I like, and that will be what like brings me to watch something. Um, Now I could go learn about something, but to actually like I could go watch somebody talking about things in a series or making comparisons or just talking about the topic, but I'll probably never get into Boruto, so I don't know much. But what I do know is that it's kind of funny. It's kind of like you know what it kind of reminds me of? This is like a complete side note. It's not even really on topic. That kind of reminds me of how in certain countries, like here, let me give an example. In America, like we're in the year 2000, right? What happens is literally 1,000 years ago. So let's say in like the 1800s, right? The 1800s and like maybe into I forget the exact years, but like it wasn't that many. Um, my fault. Not even 1,000. It was like 100 years ago. Excuse me. So I'm just trying to give a perspective, right? So I knew somebody who was 101 years old, and this was at a the type of work that I used to do. There was a past facility I was at, and there's a guy who was 101 years old, and he's and it's in the newspaper, because people living to be over 100, like they've seen a lot of stuff, right? This guy was, I forget what war it was, but like he's seen stuff like many, he's seen stuff over a generation back, right? So he's like a great grandparent. And what happens is if you go back 100 years, like things was drastically different than they are now, and there was certain wars going on that were had a drastic effect on the world and society. Many lives were lost. Many there was the level of danger that parts of the world we're in was like way. I'm not gonna say like is way higher than like what's going on now or whatever. If anything, it's probably even worse now because back then they weren't throwing missiles at countries. Back then it was they're sending in foot soldiers to go fight in like wars over on the eastern hemisphere of the world, wherever it was. But what happens is those wars were fought, and then what happens is generations that came after some of those, and every war is bad, so it's not even to compare wars. Like someone people losing their life in wars is just completely effed up. But after some of those wars played out, what happens is when that by the time that society might have eventually rebuilt itself, like that could take over 50 years, literally. Like new kids have to be born and grow up. Some of them grow up without families or parents who died, and all that stuff. Now that society is able to, I guess, if anything, stabilize itself after taking a hit economically and population wise. Literally, what happens is some of those societies have been given the they've been given the opportunity to even relax a little bit and not have to, like, yes, there was trauma and war and all that stuff, but the next generation over or two generations over after the war is completely finished, like those people don't have to experience anything that their literal ancestors went through, right? Or people older than them in their society. So, and because the people who are older than them went through that, like that might have even made it so that they can live easier, right? So that's the way I see Boruto, is that like literally all those villages and all those ninjas who are united at that point, and Naruto's Hokage and all that stuff, like all those people, including Naruto, went through wars where all their lives were at risk, and they all actually had a very high chance of dying. And if they all died, like they wouldn't have had kids to the point where the next generation who's their kids or whatever, like there would Boruto wouldn't exist if they died, right? So the way I kind of see Boruto is it's literally those kids get to have their storyline because their parents didn't die in the Great Ninja War, where it was them against like a Obito, who's pretty much like a reality level threat terrorist because he was trying to control the world using, you know, whatever mystical things he was doing and having control over all the tailed beasts and whatever, if you know the lore of the show. But the way I see Boruto is that's that whole timeline was possible because of what they went through, but it's also things aren't as like severe, and it's not that a show needs to be severe or whatever, but like it's almost like they also made that show for younger generations. And I'm not trying to say that, oh, like I'm too old to watch that show. Like no, like I'm aware that I could watch anything and like it or not. But what happens is like I don't think that Boruto would do it for me the way Naruto did or whatever. And I'm aware that it's even targeting a younger audience. Just like when I was a kid, Naruto was literally a kid. So Naruto being the first season of Naruto, he was a kid around like the same age I was when I first seen him in Shonen Jump, and I was in elementary school. We were like probably around the same age, but he's a fictional character, right? Then when I was like in my early 20s, um Naruto Shippuden got released probably a little bit around when I was in my early 20s or before that. And by that time, like, all right, now I'm the same age. I'm not the same age as Naruto, but he's getting older and he's becoming a teenager and growing into it like a young adult. And I also was when I was. So it's like I'm aware that like for example, millennials and some of the generations right below millennials, they kind of grew up watching Naruto, and Naruto grew up as time went on during the storyline, and so they kind of like could relate to the character. Boruto is, I think, relating to younger watchers of anime nowadays, but anybody could watch it, right? Blah blah blah. Didn't have to say all that, but what happens is like Naruto is like the staple um of that entire thing. I think Naruto is more viral than Boruto. Highly likely or whatever is going to be known as like a legendary anime of all time. And Kakashi is literally a pivotal person to his story. So obviously, like anybody who's into anime a little bit has seen him before, even if they don't know his name. And I didn't have to segue that much to say all that, but okay. So basically, let me just hop in and talk about whatever regarding the sketch. It's not going to be lined up with where I am in the video though. Starting with the overall head shape and basic angle at this stage, I'm focusing more on proportions than details. The forehead protector, aka the headband with the metal thing on it, that had it's probably not even really a protector. It's probably just it's just a badge to show like what village he's from. Um, the forehead protector becomes a major landmark because it helps me place the eyes and hair correctly. Obviously, it's right in between. Um, it's not just blank forehead area; it's actual details and a clothing that's right in that area, so you can kind of see where the proportions line up for the eyes and hair around it. Right. Kakashi's hair is one of the most trickiest parts because the spikes need structure rather than randomness. I'm trying to create larger groups before breaking them into smaller spikes. Now I'm refining the visible eye and adding the mask. Because most of the face's cover, the eye has to carry a lot of the character's personality. Next, I'm building the vest and collar. I'm paying attention to overlapping forms because that creates depth. Um, yeah, yeah, basically. And when it comes to depth, obviously, let me just touch on a few things I mentioned. So when it comes to creating depth, right? So I said paying attention to overlapping forms. Well, even more than that or whatever, because let's say that my perspective is good enough that you could tell that something I drew maybe a bit bigger, even if it was angled in a certain direction, like that you could tell that that was closer. And I drew it well in proportion to everything else in the photo that's either could be in front of that or behind that, but not directly in front of or behind or whatever. But you could, but what happens is like shading is the other part of getting proportions correct, obviously, right? Or it's another major aspect or whatever. Like obviously the proportions have to be correct, but shading so that if there was, for example, a light source um, from whatever direction, and the way the light is hitting him, and then you having the shade accordingly. And I'm only using blue pen, but even if you had color, like, well, how much is the light hitting this area, that area, that would help create the depth that you want to have up here as well. Which makes the character obviously look more realistically the way that they should, based on how you want to draw them, right? There's people who there's people who are very good at drawing humans like in real life. So you know it's a drawing, but it looks like if someone took a photograph of somebody else, like a real human, right? But somebody could literally draw Kakashi and but draw him as a real human, even if they never seen someone who looked like him before or whatever, right? If that even exists, they could draw someone who looks like him, but they still would bring forth the aspects of like what makes Kakashi Kakashi or whatever. So draw a real person you've seen in real life, but give them the similar facial structure to him and similar hair structure, and have him wearing the same type of clothing and his headband and his mask or whatever, right? But then realistically, how's the shading and lighting look and the proportions? Or it could be very, very cartoonistic, and then you'd have to apply that same stuff, right? But yeah, overall, the sketch came out strong. I think that I'd say the line confidence and character recognition is both improving compared to some of my older drawings.